Hey guys, relatively short one tonight. What I want to talk about tonight is something that has been on people's mind for quite a long time, and that is whether or not the elites in the government and in Hollywood are involved in some very dubious crap on certain islands throughout the world. Now, one thing you gotta remember about all this is that there are people out there who will abuse children if they're given any modicum of power. There can be many reasons for this, some kind of mental illness, or because they've just got so much money that they become internally bored. There's no excuse for it, and we all know how the Bible and how a lot of Americans would want to deal with these people. And I agree 100%. Anyone who abuses children like that should get what's coming to them. But what I specifically want to talk about is Dan Bongino and Cash Patel, and the idea that Epstein didn't off himself. Now, this is something I have been on the fence about for a long time. I believe that in either case it is completely possible. Exactly. I have not been convinced either way on what I think actually happened in that jail cell. However, there's a few possibilities. So, what do we know about what actually happened? One, Jeffrey Epstein was supposed to have a roommate, a cellmate, who was supposed to be there to prevent him from hurting himself. Then there was a camera system that had failed in the area. The guards were supposed to be checking on him every half hour. He probably wasn't the only one, but he was like the main one that was supposed to be checked on. And they weren't doing it. The cameras failed. The cell block locked down, and all of the cells in the cell block opened up, is what my understanding of the situation is. And the guards had fallen asleep. Now, there's three possibilities, right? One, he selficide. And the autopsy specifically says that he had broken his neck in such a way that indicates it's more likely that it was not a selficide. Now, I kind of believe that he didn't selficide. However, where it becomes unclear to me is whether or not there was some kind of grand conspiracy behind it. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a lot of high-ranking people in the government and in Hollywood, a lot of rich people who were involved with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, they may have been friends with him. They may have gone to his island. I forget what the name of it off the top of my head is. St. James Island. St. James Island. And there's some... If you look at the place and if you look at the nearby island that actually has habitation and the name of some of the restaurants around there, especially the pizza place, it's just it's it's pretty unusual. Let's just say that. So, with all these high-ranking people, very influential people who donate to politicians, people who are politicians, many of them were friends with him or went to party on his island. Now, that doesn't mean that they actually did anything while they were there. The grand majority of them probably haven't, and that's why they're afraid, because even if they haven't done anything, their name even being on the list puts their whole careers in danger. And that could be held against them. Like, if you had gone to his island not knowing exactly, like, what kind of business they got up to there, and you only found out later, well, whether or not you actually did anything with anybody on the island, they could hold that over your head and say, hey, you were in this place, this is the kind of stuff I've been doing there. You think anyone's going to believe you if they find out that you were on my island? And turns out, no, a lot of people would not believe that person. They would have just assumed automatically that they had done something wrong while on his island. And a lot of them probably had done something wrong. and had been filmed doing something wrong. Now, it's possible that at least a few of these knew exactly what was going on, and it's also possible that a few of them went to a party, got asked out, got some woman come up to him and offer to do something, and that person lied about their age on orders from Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And then they could come in after the whole deed was done and say, hey, she's 16. Congratulations. You played yourself. You're now mine. And that's totally possible. So Jeffrey Epstein had a lot of enemies. However, the problem that really comes from all of this is whether or not there was actually any conspiracy by these powerful people to take him out. Now, they could have bribed the guards. One of the guards actually got, basically a promotion. He went to a new prison on the other side of the country in a better paying position. Doesn't really mean much because, well, going to California to get a pay raise is not necessarily actually a pay raise because of local conditions there. Things are very expensive in California. So even if they doubled your pay, as opposed to where Jeffrey was actually in prison, it may actually be a downgrade, all things considered. So he might have just gone to the other side of the country in order to escape his past, basically. And he knew that people would hire him even though he had been involved in one of the most high-profile cases in the country. Again, all of this is circumstantial evidence. Now, maybe one of the guards was bribed, and that guard, broke the camera, took the prisoner out of Jeffrey's cell so that he was alone, and then basically told him that it's hey, you had two choices. We're either going to destroy you, have a prisoner take you out, or you can take yourself out, or whatever. Totally possible, okay? However, you gotta remember that a lot of people in prison who have gone to prison are violent offenders. And you also have to remember that they don't need anyone to bribe them. They don't need anyone to pay them to take out somebody interested in PDFs, okay? It is very, very common to get shanked in prison if you have abused children. A lot of prisoners have children and are absolutely disgusted by people who are attracted to them. And Jeffrey Epstein was supposed to be kept out of general population for that very reason. However, he was in a cell block with a bunch of other individuals. Now, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel have come out and basically said that they looked at the files, they did all their due diligence, and these are both people who, in the past, pushed the idea that maybe Epstein hadn't did not commit selficide. And now they're saying that no, they looked at the evidence and they actually now believe that he did. Now, these people are idiots. They would know that it's possible that the files have been messed with, or there's information missing, or that the due diligence during the investigation didn't happen, and that there's other circumstances that may be relatively important that were overlooked at the time. And they would push to have this evidence revealed, have their computers scanned, try to make sure that they are actually getting all the information possible on the case in order to prove whether or not it was a selficide or if it was a homicide. Now, it's a very hard thing to be involved with because Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are definitely not two people that you would have any blackmail material on. Dan Bongino is very open about how he acts, how he's lived, and it there's nothing that people could say or do to threaten him. He has put himself out there and has gone out of his way to tell people exactly what he feels and what he thinks, regardless of all the threats and all the like things they go after him for. So I don't think it's possible that he's bribed. Could he be tricked? Again, I don't think he's dumb. So that leaves two options. One, the evidence is so damning. Either they have seen the Epstein files, and like the evidence is just so out there, having so many people on it, that it would completely destroy like civilization if you actually arrested all these people, which I doubt. And therefore they want to hide it. And they want to show that no, they will lie and say it was a selficide. Or they legitimately think it was a selficide. Now, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, was suspicious about it, and he was pushing for an investigation. Now, his brother was absolutely disgusted by what he had been doing when he heard the whole thing, but it's still his family, and he still wanted to know exactly what had happened to his brother. So he has been pushing for an investigation, or to at least be told what the investigation found, because no one was telling him anything, which is fair, and that also adds to the conspiracy of it, the whole thing. So exactly which side of the argument do you fall on then? Do you think like Dan Bongino and Cash Patel were somehow being blackmailed or bribed? Me personally, I don't think so. Do you think that they found something so egregious, so horrible, so absolutely world-shattering that they can't reveal the information in fear of like destroying like civilized society as we know it? Again, I don't really think so. Now, there are definitely people like Trump definitely doesn't want to go after like high-profile individuals, his political opponents, and a lot of the rich and famous. Like, they have talked about throwing like Hunter Biden in like Mayorkas and Fauci in jail, right? But in order to do that, they have to have a certain amount of political capital built up. And they have to show like 100% that they did something wrong. And then they also have to get past the fact that these people have been pardoned by the president. Now, whether or not you believe that Biden actually pardoned these guys, or if one of his staffers used an auto pen, it's kind of hard to actually go about trying to figure that out, because it doesn't really matter. Because Biden, if you ask Biden, it's like, hey, did you pardon those guys? And if Biden says, yes, I did, then that's the end of the discussion, because you don't actually need the president to sign a pardon. The actual pardon comes from when the president says that they are pardoned. The Constitution never states that you actually have to have a physical piece of paper with a signature on it to finalize a pardon. All that piece of paper does is show that people can hold that up and be like, hey, I was pardoned. See, everyone can see it. But the president can pardon whoever he wants without the piece of paper. It's just formality. So whether or not Biden actually signed those pardons or somebody signed it for him, it might not even matter. Now, Biden's a whole nother story that we'll have to talk about at some time. It's just absolutely crazy what has been going on with the country and what has happened in the last 4 years. The fact that he had cancer probably for that entire period of time, but completely unrelated. But in my personal opinion, I always fell in between. Like, I believe in Occam's razor. Like, the simplest answer is the most likely one. You can have this like grand conspiracy that the people hired like some kind of like super duper secret assassin to take out the guy, and that like everyone was in on it, from the guard to the prisoners to freaking some of the most powerful elites in the world. Maybe. It is possible that somebody was specifically tasked with actually taking the guy out or putting the guy in position where he could be taken out. However, both the guards are supposed to keep everyone alive, but they don't like people who abuse children either. And the prisoners don't like people who abuse children. It is very likely that there was a conspiracy, but not of the powerful and the elite. It could have just been between the guards and the prisoners, with some corrupt guard being passed like an extra bottle of booze or whatever, and he gives like one of the prisoners a shank and just says, "Go to town. Like, that monster needs to be taken out." 100% possible. There are corrupt guards out there who will basically do whatever the head prisoner is, like who's ever in charge of like the biggest gang will do. Not that the guard's part of the gang, but the guard knows that as long as he keeps like the gang placated, and he can use them to his advantage to take out somebody he don't like, 100% possible that that's what happened. That there was no grand conspiracy between the powerful and the elite, but between the prisoners and the guards. And that, like, they weren't influenced by anyone on the outside. Also possible. It is also possible that it was legitimately just a selficide. Like, people were talking about how the damage to his neck is more likely to have been caused by somebody else choking him. And yes, again, 100% possible. But if he is like choking himself and he wants to end it quickly, he could literally have just been jerking himself around, like literally jerking his head to try to make it go faster, if you know what I mean. The human body, when it has a lot of adrenaline pumping through it, is capable of truly amazing things. So it could be that the injuries were completely self-inflicted, because he was just so desperate to make it happen as quickly as possible before somebody could go and try to save him. Again, just because something is unlikely to happen and doesn't mean that it didn't happen that way. It's unlikely that those injuries are caused by a selficide. But just because something is unlikely doesn't mean it's impossible. Now, again, I have been listening to information on this for a long time, but without ever actually seeing the evidence that the FBI has in their hands, and without knowing whether or not the FBI messed with any of the data or evidence, or if like there's more evidence out there to be collected, it's really hard for me to actually make a firm judgment on this. So that's why I want to ask you guys. I want to know what you guys think about this. Like, in the comments, give me like the information. Again, avoid keywords that could get your comment erased. I mean, you can ask like Grok, like what kind of like write out your comment, put it in the Grok and say, is there anything inside this comment that is likely to get auto-deleted by YouTube, for example? Because I want to hear your opinions, and I don't want your opinions to be suppressed. And so you should go write your comment, put it in an AI, and ask the AI whether or not there's any terms in there that would get the comment deleted. And if so, how could you censor the post so that I can actually see it? I really want to hear your opinions on this. I'm not just asking for comments to boost it in the algorithm. I actually, I, this is one of those situations where outside opinions are very valuable to me because this is a hard judgment call for me to make because Dan Bongino was pretty insistent before he became part of the FBI that he thought that it was not a selficide. And then he comes in and then he looks at the evidence and then suddenly he changes his mind. Is it suspicious? Possibly. Is it that he just found information that he realizes, oh, well, yeah, it turns out that I was just wrong. I was just being paranoid or whatever. Possible. But I'm like, what did he find in those files to make him change his mind? That's the question that is on everybody's mind right now. So, again, comment below. Make sure that you censor anything that will get the comment deleted, and then we'll go from there, guys. Okay. Bye.